Well, good morning, everybody. You know, Jesus surprises us a lot. Let me tell you a story about what happened this week, or about the last week and a half. We are currently planning on taking our 8th graders, about 100 of them, to camp at beautiful Camp Pu'ukahea in Waianae, April 15, 16, 17. So we leave the school on a Wednesday afternoon after school, and then we come back on Friday afternoon, have a barbecue and everything like that at the middle school. It's a great time. The kids are about 13 years old, and just great, every single one of them. Now, if you've never done a camp, you have no idea what is involved in preparing for a camp. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to get the kids to the camp. Seems like a no-brainer, really is. So I call up our bus company, school bus company, and I asked them, we need to get transportation for our kids out to Waianae this date at this time, and we've done this hundreds of times before. They're like, oh, yeah, no problem, we can get you out there. I was like, and then we need to come back on Friday at about 11 o'clock-ish. And she says, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I says, well, then how about 11:30? She's like, no, you don't understand. We don't have any buses available on Friday whatsoever. We are booked solid from morning till night. Like, oh, okay. So there is a second bus company on the island. I call them up, and it's like, yeah, I need some buses to take 100 kids back to Honolulu. Can you help us out? And the lady's like, oh, I'm sorry, we're totally booked up. There's only 2 school bus companies on this island. There is not a third choice. We got to get these kids back home. And so it's like, okay, how are we going to do this? So what I did was I called up, they call themselves luxury motor coach companies. And I Googled them. I started to call them one by one. You would not believe how expensive those buses are. They're not school buses, I'll tell you that, and they're just so far out of budget. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This all happened Thursday a week ago. And it's like, okay, time to do some serious prayer here, because I know that God provides for all of our needs, but He's not doing a whole lot right now. And so I'm thinking, okay, we can't do the luxury motor coaches. I was thinking about calling up the trolleys, okay? And then I'm thinking 113-year-olds in trolleys for 36 miles on a Friday afternoon. No, that's not going to work. Have parents pick up their kids out in Waianae on Friday afternoon with the contraflow? Oh no, that would be epic. I was even thinking, what if we put 10 kids each on a school bus, and not a school bus, but a city bus to get them home? No, that's not going to work. I was thinking about vans. I was thinking about everything. And all weekend I'm praying for it. Monday morning, I'm driving in from here to the school, and I'm at the Kalihi Merge right there, and maybe I'm not the nicest driver in the world because I didn't want other people cutting in front of me. And so I'm going, and all of a sudden, this huge tourist bus cuts me off so much that I got to slam on my brakes. If you got the anti-lock brakes, it's like, pop, 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 pop. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what was that? And then I noticed the back of the bus. It's like, I did not call that company. And I'm looking up, it's like, God, is this a sign? What's going on? And so I get to the school about 9 o'clock when this company opens up. I give them a call. And I explain the situation to this lady that answers the phone. And she's like, okay, so where do you need to go? I says, well, we need to pick up the kids at Camp Pu'ukahea, which is right behind Waianae Baptist Church. She's like, oh, Waianae Baptist Church. I know Waianae Baptist Church. Oh, yeah, that's good. And she says, where are you going? I says, well, then we got to go back to Hawaii Baptist Academy up on Poly. Oh, HBA Eagles. Go Eagles. Yeah, I know HBA. Yeah, we could do that. And I'm like, okay. And she says, in about 5 minutes, I'll send you an email with an estimate, okay? I'm like, sure. 5 minutes later, I get an email. And it was an estimate for $150 less than our regular school bus company. This is what God does. So now, our students are going to return from camp on time in luxury motor coaches instead of school buses. God not only provides for our needs, but He does better than we could ever imagine. And I tell you that story to introduce you to the man that Jesus found at the Sheep Gate Pool. And this is a much greater story. You see, this man that Jesus encounters, he did not think that he had any other options. But Jesus surprises us. If you have your Bibles, open up to the Gospel of John chapter 5. John chapter 5, starting in verse 2. It says, "Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. One man who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, 'Do you want to be healed?' The sick man answered him, 'Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm going down, another steps down before me.' Jesus said to him, 'Get up, take up your bed and walk.' And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked." Now this is an incredible story here. You know, when Jesus went to Jerusalem, he did not spend his time in elite hotels, nor did he concentrate his ministry merely in the temple or give attention to the rich and famous who could help him out politically and financially. No. He concentrated and he went where people in need were. Excuse me. In this account, he goes to one of the worst places you can imagine. There is a pool at the sheep gate that a lot of the handicapped and the disabled people sat around. And there was this legend that an angel would visit the pool at random times. And if you were the first person in the water when the waters moved, you would be healed. Well, this was a superstition and a very wrong one too, and the theology is totally off. This is like the theology of God would only help the first come, first serve, okay? If you're not first, get lost, chump. And what was actually happening at this pool, from what most archaeologists believe, was that it was a natural spring, and that the water is just bubbling up from that natural spring. And people thought, well, maybe this is God. Maybe this is a way for me to be healed. And sometimes people will do crazy things when nothing else works. And you have a lot of these people waiting around the pool by the sheep gate. This is where people would take their animals into the fields. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with real sheep, okay? And I'm not talking about the cute little petting zoo lambs that they always keep washed and clean and all of that stuff. Oh, they're so cute. Sheep are not like that. I don't like sheep. Let me tell you a little story. When I lived in Germany, I was in this small town named Niedermoor. And there were a lot of farmers that lived in town that kept their sheep in town, okay? And, sometimes you would be driving home at night and there's no speed limits in Germany, and you're coming home kind of hyper-warped, and all of a sudden you take a turn and here's like 50 sheep right in front of you in the road, and it'll really get your heart beating. I came home one night, and my landlord had 2 sheep, and these were her lawnmowers, okay? And I didn't know anything about these sheep, and I see these 2 sheep, and I'm getting out of my car, and I got groceries in my hand, and I'm looking at these sheep, first time, and it's like, so, sheep, how you doing? Not bad. And I'm walking up, I know. And I'm walking up to my door, and I start to hear, bah, bah. And I look around, and I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but apparently I'm in the sheep's territory. And it puts its head back down into its shoulders, and its head is waggling, and it's making this noise. And all of a sudden, it just leaps for me. And I don't know what to do. It hits me right in the back. Groceries are going everywhere. And I see the other sheep getting ready to come in, and the first one's backing up. And it's like, oh, no, this is not good. Get the keys out of my pocket, finally get them in the door, get hit again, finally bust open through the door, and one of the sheep comes in with me. So I got to get one of the cushions off of the couch and beat that sheep out of the living room. I hate sheep, okay? But back to our story. Sorry about that. So you have this man by the sheep gate, and if you've never been around sheep, you also know that they drop a lot of stuff on the ground, okay? So if you have this gate that the sheep are going in and out of all the time, it's not a very good place. So you have these helpless dregs and diseased individuals in an area of the city that smells like sheep droppings. This is not where the cool people go to congregate. This is not where the popular people party. These are the outcast, the shunned, be unwelcome. But Jesus goes there, because that's what he does. And Jesus comes upon this man who's been there for 37 years. Most likely, he's partially paralyzed. And so it is noteworthy that Jesus takes the initiative to ask the question, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed? And that really is the big question, isn't it? Do you want to be healed? The first essential thing towards receiving the power of Jesus is the intense desire for it. Let me say that again. The first essential thing towards receiving the power of Jesus is the intense desire for it. Jesus comes to us and says, do you really want to be changed? Do you want to be healed? If in our inmost hearts we are well content to stay the same, there will be no change. Jesus does not force himself upon anyone. Do you want to be healed? And I've met many people that would answer that question, no. People, I'll just say, I'm fine the way that I am. They might know that they have a problem or a situation in their life, but that's okay. I can handle it myself. And there are many people who have addictions, compulsions, that just cannot seem to help themselves, or they think that they can help themselves and they don't need help from anybody else. Or maybe they believe that nothing can help them. You know, we have a great number of homeless on this island that we do try to help. But sometimes when you meet with them, it's that they have lost all their love of life. And some that I've met out in Waianae, they just wake up, sit up on the hill and watch traffic go by all day long. They have nowhere to go. And they have nothing to do. There is no calendar in their life. And they might have tried getting jobs, but either the job couldn't help, or they had child care to take care of, or they had been living in a house, they had been trying to find another place to live, and nothing happens. And you come to this point that there's just no help for me. I've tried everything. There's nothing. There's a lot of people like this. Do you want to be healed? Look at the man's answer. It's neither yes nor no, but rather, the sick man answered him and said, Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. And when I'm going, another steps down before me. He doesn't have any assistance to get to the pool. He's just a victim of his circumstances. And there are many, possibly people in here, that feel as if you're just a victim of circumstances. There is nothing that you can do about it. As I mentioned before, I'm the middle school chaplain for Hawaii Baptist Academy. My world is made of kids between 11 and 13 years old. It's a very different world. And sometimes these kids will feel as if nothing can help them, that they're just a victim of so many different things. You know, maybe their parents are divorced. And all of a sudden we have a father-daughter dinner at the church for the middle schoolers. Well, I guess not going to that. Maybe they have a bully in their life. Maybe they have a sibling or a parent with serious health issues, sometimes even life-threatening issues. They might have a teenage sibling that's extremely rebellious and is just fracturing the entire family because they just will not conform to anything. Maybe there's someone with a substance abuse problem within their own family. Or maybe it's just mom and dad work so much that the child feels abandoned. They may feel as if they lack support from others. Or sometimes they just want to run and hide or run away. But there's nowhere to go. And so they think that they have nothing and no one will ever be able to help them, and they're doomed. And they're only 12 years old. This man at the pool sees only one way to be healed, and his mind is completely closed to being healed in any other way. He just needs someone to help him get to the pool. Do you want to be healed? The great theologian John Calvin said this about this man. He says, this sick man does what we nearly all do. He limits God's help to his own ideas and does not dare promise himself more than he conceives in his own mind. And so many people think that God is limited just to their own reasoning and their own imagination. If I can't think it, God can't do it. And we think that's who God is. You know, I also teach a robotics class at the school. And sometimes when something goes wrong with that robot or it just doesn't work, the child will just sit there and stare at the robot and stare and stare and stare. And sometimes this will go on for minutes, and it's like, no, man, you got to start thinking about other things that are going. And sometimes these kids have what I refer to as the Eeyore syndrome. It'll never work. And, you just run into people with that attitude. They just, a lot of times, bring everybody else down, but it'll never work. Nothing can help. That type of thing. God's power is not like that. I have this message that I give to high school kids, talk about he's not your second grade Jesus. A lot of times, when people come to Jesus at a young age and do not bother to learn anymore, that they keep thinking as if their Jesus is still this concept that they got in second grade. And your second grade Jesus is great. I love the Bible stories. I love all of these things that we could teach kids that are 6 and 7 years old. That's great. But sometimes people's thinking is limited to that. I had a second grader down at our elementary school. And after chapel, we're sitting in the chapel, which is a room about this size. And he asked me, how big is God? And I always like to ask questions back. It's like, well, how big do you think he is? And he says, is he as big as this chapel? And I wanted to think, it's like, no, Sean, he's bigger than this chapel. And Sean says, well, how big is he? I says, how big is light? How big is light? And you could see in Sean's eyes that they popped open. He was like, wow. And see, as we grow up, as we proceed in life, and things in our lives change, we are going to see that God is even greater than that, whatever that is in your life. And this is how our faith grows. That we have to remember, he's not our second grade Jesus. The more that we grow, the more that we can comprehend, the more we can comprehend about him. And as he intercedes in our life, through big things and through little things, and even through helping me get a bus, I start to say, really? Are you even greater than that? Yeah. And many of you have things in your own life, things that you have struggled with, things that you have prayed for over and over and over, and sometimes you might even doubt, God, are you bigger than that? And you find out, yeah. But again, we have to be very careful that we do not limit God to our own reasoning and to our own imagination. I thought that I had called every bus company on this island. I thought that I had looked at every conceivable option that was out there. But God very quickly, by throwing a bus in my face, showed me, no, I'm even greater than that. Philippians 4:13, the Apostle Paul says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Most people stop at the end of the first 5 words. I can do all things. And you think that you're strong enough and that you have the intelligence, that you have the wisdom and everything to get through every situation in your life. I say that because that's the way my brain works. But we all come to find out that it's the second part of that sentence that's the most important. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Never underestimate the power of the love of Christ. Never underestimate the power of the love of Christ. He believes in you more than you believe in him. The man at the pool lacked a great attribute that we all need, and this is the attribute of curiosity. At the school, at HBA, one of our learning goals that we try to teach the kids is curiosity. And we teach the students that we cultivate curiosity by asking questions, seeking opportunities to learn, trying new things, persevering in our quest for answers. You see, when it comes to our faith, our very belief in Christ, we need to be curious because we need to progress past that second grade Jesus. John chapter 5, verses 8 and 9. Jesus tells this man at the pool, get up, take up your bed and walk. And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now see, Jesus did not dispute this man's poor theology or his view of angelic visitation. He simply told him to get up, take his mattress or bedroll, and just go. And surely amazed and overjoyed, the man followed Jesus' orders. And that's what we all need to do. Just do what he tells us to do. It's a pretty good place to be if that's what you're doing. And the thing is, you don't need to know everything to know Jesus. We just need to be able to put our trust and our faith in him. We had a youth pastor on this island, it's got to be about 15 years ago now, that had one of our students, her name was Caitlin, talk to him about baptism. And let me tell you a little bit about Caitlin. She was a junior girl at this time, so she's 16, 17 years old. This is a girl that was awesome. Okay, she had been a camp counselor for us many times, led Bible studies for us, took a leadership position in some of our ministries that we do on the Waianae Coast. This is a girl that led prayer meetings at the school in high school. And let me tell you something, that can be scary in high school. But she did all these things, and she went to her youth pastor and says, I've never been baptized. Can I be baptized? And so the youth pastor started to talk to her and, talk about her faith and everything. And then he asked her this one question. He says, what is the exact date that you asked Jesus into your life? And she says, well, I don't remember exactly what day it was, but I know that I did it. And this pastor looked back at her and says, well, if you don't know the exact date that you accepted Christ, then obviously you haven't accepted Christ. Therefore, you're not a Christian, and I can't baptize you. What? This girl came into my office on Monday morning, and she's upset, she's in tears, and she's like, Mr. Lockridge, I don't know the day that I've been baptized. Am I going to heaven or hell? And when she told me the whole story, I finally just says, okay, Caitlin, if you're not doing anything for lunch, okay, we're going to go down to Nu'uanu Stream at lunch, and I can baptize you right there if you want. And she's like, no, Mr. Lockridge, that's okay. But it just amazed me that this person would not baptize her because of that. Because that just blows my mind. You see, let me tell you another quick story. This one is the first girl that I prayed with to come to Christ at HBA. And 7th grade girl comes to my office and she's like, I want to ask Jesus to come into my life, but I don't know how. Oh man, your heart just melts when you hear things like that. And so we walked out and sat underneath a plumeria tree. I just asked her, Deborah, would you like to just pray with me? She says, I don't know how. And I says, well, I can teach you. When Deborah came up to me and said that to me, I didn't interview her. I didn't say, Deborah, if you want to be a Christian, I want you to bring me a note from your Bible teacher making sure that you're getting an A. Because if you don't have an A in Bible, how can you possibly become a Christian? I didn't do that. She just wants to know Jesus. You don't have to know everything about Jesus to be healed. God is not limited by our weakness. And sometimes it is in our weakest moments that we realize how powerful he is. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 through 10, Paul tells us this. But he, Jesus, said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Acknowledging our weakness makes room for God's power. Acknowledging our weakness does make room for God's power. You don't need to know everything to ask Jesus into your life. You just need to have the desire to be healed. And God will surprise you. Do you want to be healed? Now, as our worship team comes up, I want to ask you some questions. And we have these questions, in your bulletin this morning. And you can either write on your bulletin or you can think about these things, but we're going to give you a couple of minutes just to take a time of reflection right here. And the first question that I want for you to ask yourself, in your heart of hearts, in what area of your life do you feel the weakest? Just in your own heart, what area of your life do you feel the weakest? Maybe you feel weak emotionally. Maybe you feel weak physically. Maybe there's a situation that's going on in your life right now where you just feel very weak, that you're that you're out of control. In what area of your life do you feel weakest? And then what is something in your life that you need healed? What's something in your own life that you need healed? Again, it might be a person in your life that you've been praying for that person for physical healing. Or maybe it's someone in your life that desperately needs God and you've been praying for that person so much. And it seems as if God is not hearing. But you need this. What is something in your life that you need healed? And I want you to think about these two questions, answers if you have them. I want you to think about it. Now, I want you to think, have I been limiting God to my own ideas? Have I been limiting Him to just what I know and not remembering that He's bigger than that? And then I want you just to take a moment to pray and to ask God, Lord, please heal me. And I'll give you a few moments to do that, then I'll close us up in prayer. Father, I do pray for those here in our congregation that are calling out to you. Lord, I need to be healed. Lord, please intercede in my life. I realize that I am weak and that I cannot do all things, but I can do all things through you who strengthen me. And I recognize, Lord, that I have been limiting you to my own ideas, my own thoughts, my own concepts. But you are greater than all of that. And that you do surprise us, Lord. So, Lord, I do pray for healing on those here that are asking, that you would help, that you would heal, that you would lift them up and act in ways that we have never thought of before. And I pray these things in Jesus' name, amen.